Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be across this beautiful blue-green globe of ours. And it is a globe. Welcome to Real News Live. This is a special Saturday edition. And I have a special guest today, Marina Seren from Madrid, Spain. Marina, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you for inviting me to your podcast.
Yes. Have you enjoyed your trip to Vegas so far?
I am enjoying the trip to Vegas.
It's so hard for me not to say certain things, but yeah, it's been great having you here and getting to like show you some sights and stuff here in Vegas. It's been loads of fun. So thanks for being here. I just want to tell everybody in the audience, news-wise on the financial restructuring stuff that we talk about on the regular show, there's not a lot of news. Everybody's waiting for an event on Monday. Nobody's quite sure what it is, but we're waiting for that. And then Tuesday we should know more. So that's kind of the crux of the information that I have at this point. So everybody stay calm. The reason I wanted to have Marina on is because we've talked before. We've had a couple of interviews, not face-to-face, but over the internet, over Zoom, basically, talking about your experiences and the things that you had happen to you in your life as a sort of an alien experiencer. And of course, everybody knows that originally that's what I did. I did aliens, and I still do them. But it's not really, not the focus of this show necessarily, but I thought it would be great to bring you in here and get into greater depth on some of these things. So why don't you tell me, how this all started for you, your memories coming back.
Mhm.
And I do believe it started, there was amnesia, right? That you had experiences when you were very young that you didn't really
Yes.
remember until later. So how old were you when you first started realizing something unusual had happened to you?
It was about 15 years old, approximately.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to high school, and I wanted to study science in order to get the answer about the structure of these systems. I wanted to ask that question, like, why do we exist, and how the universe was created, etc. So that led me into metaphysics eventually. And to me, that was like a trigger for my awakening and all the experiences that I will have in my life. And well, just follow a series of memories coming back to me.
Yeah. Why do we exist? That's an interesting question that nobody really has a good answer to.
I know.
I always ask a question. Does the universe create consciousness, or does consciousness create the universe? What do you think about that dichotomy?
I think it's definitely consciousness. It's a
Mhm.
fundamental pillar of everything in existence. So yeah, there will be no reality, no material reality at all, neither physical, without that element.
Mhm.
Everything is ideal and conceptual. It comes from consciousness.
Right. Now, do you believe, in terms of staying with the physics, that physical reality, like solid matter, is actually is solid, or is it just energy? Like I've always kind of looked at it as you have light waves and sound waves, because I think everything in the universe is a wave. I don't.
Everything. That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you for telling me I'm correct on that one. And it's just interfering waves of light and sound, and as they interfere with each other through various processes that are pretty complex, everything slows down, and the slower it gets, the more solid it gets, the denser it gets. So do you believe that there is, however, a physical reality? This is not just energy. This is something physical and hard, or is it just a manifestation of a certain type of energy?
That's a very interesting question. The thing is that we are misusing the term physical in our day-to-day world. Physical does not mean material. Physical means anything that is a physical entity that exists within space and time. So it could be light, or it could be matter. So matter really is that which is more of a crystallized electromagnetic wave in the expression of space and time. It is denser. The wavelength is much longer. And so that is why we perceive it to be denser, material, opaque. I don't know if that word exists.
Mhm.
Yes. Whereas, the non-physical is still physical, is it still electromagnetic energy,
Yeah.
but it's not as crystallizing to the space-time continuum
But
of reality.
I mean, it does take up physical space in a sense, even though electromagnetic
Everything
signal,
is.
right? It's like there are particles or something at some level that take up some actual physical space.
Exactly.
Okay. And so when you think about that concept, there's so many things in physics that I think are completely wrong, right? And it's like people just aren't asking the right questions because we've gotten off on the wrong footing. Do you Well, and again, we've talked about Freemasons and things like that. I mean, most people don't know the electromagnetic equations that everybody thinks are Maxwell's are actually Oliver Heaviside's.
Yes.
He was, and I'm can't prove it, but I'm thoroughly convinced he was a Freemason. And Maxwell was thinking in 4 dimensions, 5 dimensions, 26 dimensions when he was doing his mathematics. But Heaviside thought, well, that's mystical and we should murder that from the theory, which is exactly what he did. So all of the physicists from Einstein and everybody else, they use Heaviside's equations, not Maxwell's. This is a part of what Maxwell came up with. So I think as long as we don't have that higher dimensional component, do you think that we'll ever get close to understanding the physical reality, well, what they call physics of this universe?
I believe that in terms of the scientists, if they continue to just rely on Newtonian physics, they will never get to reach out to the most important questions and answers to as to like how the universe actually works. So when it comes to quantum physics, for example, if we learn from the double slit experiment, that's actually an evidence. That's what started everything for us to understand that consciousness is that, as I said, fundamental pillar of reality, and that all of the higher dimensional construct comes along with that. So there's no such thing as just third dimensional physics as we understand them to be. There's much more than that.
Yeah. We have a very limited physical reality. Let me ask you about motion, because what I've studied and what I've known and found out, like, I started out with what they call the monuments of Mars, which is a series of pyramidal ruins and the face on Mars and things that were all aligned in these very specific mathematical patterns that talked about or pointed towards tetrahedrons and spinning spheres. That's basically like, this is how you figure out how the universe works. So everything in this universe is in motion. I mean, we have, Newton's laws of physics where they talk about, well, when a body is at rest and nothing is acting upon it, then it,
Yeah.
but nothing's ever at rest because every atom in your body has an electron spinning around it. So you can be as still as you can possibly be, but you're still moving. The planet's moving, it's spinning, it's moving through space. You've got this helical pattern that everything takes, everything goes through. It's driven by a force that I probably call dynamic torsion. So what I see is that the universe was void, completely void, and then motion started somehow. It's the old God said, "Let there be light" thing, which some people think is the Big Bang, and that started everything in motion. And then the motion creates heat, and it's the warmth from the absolute zero, from the absolute cold, that gives everything life and gives everything formation. Do you agree with that statement, or do you think it's more complex than that?
I think that's a philosophical way to put it out, which contains a lot of the metaphysical reality that comes with it. But I do believe that there was no such thing as a beginning and an end. So existence, it's sort of like a paradigm, Existence exists because non-existence cannot exist.
It's a great way to put it, but then
just think about the fact that you can only name and conceptualize the idea of non-existence
right
after a negation, after denying the idea of existence. So it's a paradigm.
But then isn't existence itself incomprehensible?
It is, and that's the point. The point is that the more that you get closer to getting all the answers as to like existence, the whys, the everything, you get to understand that you know nothing. Nothing makes sense. And that's when you realize that existence is creation.
So when you say existence is creation, you mean that you're in control of the reality that you experience?
I mean to say that you could be an expert in physics, in metaphysics, and understand all of the underlying designs of the universe and mechanisms of it. And whenever you get close to getting more and more of that information and get then the bigger question asked, you believe that you know so much and everything makes perfect sense until you actually reach that realization and you understand that everything's so ridiculous, everything doesn't make sense,
Right.
that it should be a creation. It has to be a creation from an all that is consciousness.
But yeah, I mean, all it takes is one observation to screw up the best theory ever created, right? One observation that doesn't fit. So, and I didn't intend to start with physics today, but that's just where it went. So, okay, but then again, like, I do not in my consciousness think very much about black holes. Yet black holes supposedly exist. But when I observe black holes, I keep hearing this crap about, oh, well, there's all this intense gravity and it sucks everything in, even light, and time stops on the surface of a black hole and all this other stuff, which I kind of think is nonsense. But when you observe a black hole, the ones that we have observed, and there are no pictures. People say, oh, we took a picture of a black hole. No, you took a bunch of data and you made it into a pretty little JPEG that NASA put out. You don't see energy. You don't see anything going into it. All you see is bursts of intense radiation and energy coming out of it.
Yes.
So I think these are holes in the universe through which the higher dimensional energies are coming. Do you think that observation makes any sense? And do you think NASA's completely wrong about their theories of what a black hole is?
Well, the thing is that the way that I interpret gravity to start with is not the way that the scientists of this earth has put it together. I do not believe that gravity is a force itself. It can only be it can only make sense if we take that into the dynamics of Newtonian physics with all the formulas that we know and utilize. But as a conceptual reality, gravity is not a force. The universe is vectorial. Do you know what a vector is?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So for our listeners,
used to be an engineer. Come on,
yes,
I know what a vector
of course.
Is, right? Okay.
I was just, introducing this to the.
Well,
listeners.
maybe there are people out there, not to be insulted. Maybe there are people out there who don't know what it is. Okay.
So a vector has a magnitude, a direction, and orientation, correct? Well, gravity is the consequence of reality, space, and time being vectorial. What it means is that Einstein, when he said that when you put a mass in the space, everything curves around itself, that's not correct. It's the other way around. Space and time wraps itself or curves itself around to create the geometrical disposition or patterns of whatever physical entity that may exist in the universe. So that vectorial, those vectors, it comes from the outside and then into the inner, like, let's say the centripetal or the pivotal point of the center of that physical entity will create the lines that will define magnitude, direction, and then orientation. So if I have my phone in here and I hold it, it will, and I will stop holding it. It will fall into the table, not because there's a force attracting it, but rather because the vectors of the reality are leaning or are orientated inwards to the center pivot point of the Earth.
Okay, because the Earth has mass, is that the reason? It's not, but it's not really a force.
Exactly, it's not a mass. It's not a force. Neither it's a vectorial predisposition, like design, like geometrical predisposition of the space and time.
Do you believe there are forces at work in the universe at all?
Yes, I do believe in forces, but I believe those are mostly the electrical forces, the magnetic forces, which is not.
And there's one that people don't talk about that does exist. So, okay, so it's interesting. You kind of parallel with what I think, but me personally, I don't care what gravity is. All I know is that if you have mass, you have gravity, and it's a measurable thing, and you can work around it or work with it or however you want to do it. But so there, there's this toroidal force or torsional force called dynamic torsion, which Einstein started to dabble with, but he was working with static torsion, which was very weak. But dynamic torsion is very dynamic, is very powerful. And it's interesting because, like, you're going to fly on a plane here in a few days back to Madrid.
Yes.
And I don't know if you know this, but we do not know really why planes fly. We do not know this. When we do the factor, they think it's the difference in air pressure over the airfoil and all this other stuff. If you push an airplane forward in a vector, right, in a certain direction, that you generate enough speed, you get lift, and if the wing is a certain shape. But they've done tests, and there's about 15% of the lift missing. And it always has been missing. And it even says this in the design manuals. And what I think it is it's the fact that you've got the Earth is like on a vector. It's spinning. Okay.
It's rotating.
It's orbiting the center of the sun. The sun is orbiting the center of the galaxy. The center of the galaxy is orbiting the center of the universe, wherever the hell that is. So it's when you add the additional vector, you gate energy into the system, which is the airplane, and it creates more energy for it, which lifts it up, which they can't really tell or can't measure that. So when Einstein says, or Newton basically says that, anything that's in free fall, unless a force acts on it, it shouldn't change direction. But of course, we've observed objects in free fall that change direction. And so Einstein came up with this idea, space-time must be space-time. I don't think time's a dimension. I'm going to argue that one too. Well, we might disagree on that one, right? But it basically, it must be curved, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. To me, there's got to be, we have the four forces, strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force, gravity, and magnetism. But what if there's a fifth force, which is this dynamic torsion, which is actually laid out in the math that enables you to pull energy from higher sources? Then that would be what would be affecting the spacecraft or the rock or whatever you're observing, because as long as this thing is rotating, it's pulling in a little bit of extra energy, and that's what's going to change the direction. So I don't know why I just gave you that monologue, but do you agree with any of that? Do you think that's viable?
Well, I am not sure about planes because I'm not an engineer like you, but I'm sure that everything has to do with the vectorial predisposition, as we shared before. And when the Foucault pendulums, have you heard about it? And how it basically has to work? It has to be in a free fall and swing into the same direction.
And it will swing with the rotation of the
Earth. There you go. I think it's something related to that specific concept of how it should work. If there was no force against, how do you call it in English? When something, the friction force or
something physical, air or whatever. There has to be something to act on it. The interesting thing too is Foucault pendulums. There are experiments that most people don't know about that I did put in my book, The Choice, available on Amazon.com, where during eclipses that the pendulums will swing rapidly backwards against the rotation of the Earth, which is in our current understanding of physics is completely wrong. It can't happen, but it's the alignment, because what is an eclipse? It's an alignment of two bodies with a third body, like the sun, the Earth moon is passing between the sun and the Earth. So that can affect the behavior of these. And then when the eclipse ends, they rapidly go back to the proper rotation. So is there is there a way you can account for that? Is there a way that what from the information you got that fits that behavior, because it's a viable observation?
Yes, it is viable. I don't have a solid theory to explain this.
Okay, but so that wasn't part of the lessons you learned, because a lot of this comes from the lessons you've learned from your contacts, right?
That is correct.
Okay, we should have probably established that at the beginning. So to me, it's interesting that this, your intelligence is obviously very high. We've talked about that before. So it's not like you came across this stuff by accident. Where did you get this schooling? Did I hate to bring up certain other famous abductees, but let's bring up Whitley Strieber. And he talked about when he was young that he was taken to schools where a bunch of other children, they take them out in the woods and the ETs were all around them and they would teach them stuff. Did anything like that happen to you?
Do you mean the physical reality?
Any reality.
Any reality. Well, yes. In the version of the Earth that is slightly shifted to have a higher dimensional frequency, so that higher fractal consciousness can actually exist and interact with higher dimensional beings. Although, most of that understanding is not directly translated into our frontal personality because it's not harmonically produced. It's not vibrationally matching. So yes, I mean that happened in my experiences.
Okay.
But
So, all right. So let's go back then to the beginning. Your first experiences, you said you were about 16, 15
yes,
when
15.
you first begin to be aware of it. So did you remember past experiences, or did you have an experience at the age of 15 that was just out of the ordinary and you
It was both.
Okay.
Yes.
So, you've been now when you talk about visiting other places, you say you've seen other places, other planets, other things, right? You've
Yes.
seen them. Have you physically been taken there, or have you seen them through projection, astral plane kind of stuff? What is it?
Well, most of them that are other planets, I will say it's through astral projection. Now, when it comes to the planets of our solar system or military underground bases, those will be physical experiences.
Right.
Part of we know what program we're talking about, the SSP.
Is there okay? So the Y-Files just did an episode on a script I wrote for them. There are at least 2 missing planets in this solar system, planets that were destroyed somehow. They exploded either through natural processes, which can happen, apparently, that's theoretically possible, or wars. Were there wars in this solar system in the past, and who was it between?
Yes, there were many wars in our solar system, and there has been always there have been a lot of groups that have been fighting for the hegemony of this planet and the solar system and the whole galaxy itself. And well, when it comes to the groups or the factions themselves, I wouldn't say that I can tell specifically which were in this case, but I know that the Anunnakis have the majority of the wars that we are connected or related to, and the Draconian Empire. So
the lizard people and the giants, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So it'd be like the Giants versus the Gators if it was a football game. So, do you believe when you say Anunnaki? When I think of Anunnaki, I think of Sitchin's concept of Anunnaki, which is these really big, tall guys, and I mean, you see these things. Oh, Goliath was 18 feet tall. Well, come on, no, he wasn't, unless the physics of the Earth were different, because in the concept as I understand it, the number of bodies, the spinning motion, the bulk angular momentum is what creates the energy in the system. All of the planets are connected, and of course they're connected to other systems. So if you have more planets, you can have bigger life. That's why dinosaurs were able to walk the Earth, because we had 2, 3, maybe even 4 more planets than we have now. So when I think of the Anunnaki, they call these people giants, but look, if I went back to 5500 BC at 5'9" or 5'10", I'd be a giant compared to them, right? These are little itty bitty people. So do you think that they really are giants, or are they something different? And can you describe the different Anunnaki species you're aware of?
Of course, I do actually believe they are giants, because in my contact experiences with them specifically, I saw their physical appearance and they showed to me themselves as giants. Now, there are different kinds of Anunnakis and there are different kinds of sizes that they can be. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of groups. There's the humanoid ones, the reptiloid ones, and mixtures in between humanoid and reptiloid.
Wow. That would be weird. So reptilian Anunnaki. So do they come here and pretend to be human? Do they put, masks on, or are and when again, Anunnaki confined to Nibiru, whatever the hell Nibiru is, which I just think is a brown dwarf that had a couple moons. Are they all from the same place, different species from the same planet or place, or are they coming from different areas? But in other words, is Anunnaki like a generic name for extraterrestrial species?
Well, Anunnaki is a general term, not for extraterrestrial species in general, but rather a group within them that have origins in the constellation of Lyra and Vega.
Okay.
So we can say that they have a common origin, but they took different evolutionary paths along the way. That's why we have different Anunnaki factions and different Anunnaki mixtures.
Now, So for me, you know, all physics is local. In other words, the physics in our solar system is going to be different than another solar system because we have only so many planets left, so many spinning bodies, and it's that spin energy that sort of creates the reality in this system. So as we lose planets, obviously our physics changes, people get smaller, everything gets smaller. Is that true in your experience? In other words, is someone from Zeta Reticuli a binary system? And we're not going to mention those particular people right now yet, but are they going to like have different physics there? In other words, is the speed of light slightly different in Zeta Reticuli than it is here on Earth in this solar system?
From what I've been told, the speed of light changes depending on the speed of your thought process.
Mm-hmm.
So it will have to do again with consciousness and reality, not with physics itself from a third dimensional point of view.
How do extraterrestrial? I should rephrase this. How do alien species change, beat the speed of light limitation that we think exists? I don't think it exists, but how do they get around that physical limitation or that light speed limitation that everybody thinks is real?
Do you mean with traveling?
Yeah, how do they travel
Yes.
from one system to another?
Okay.
You know, how is that exactly is that done by aliens? Because extraterrestrial, by the way, I'm just saying, when I say extraterrestrial, that could be a human, like that could be me living on Mars. I would then be an extraterrestrial. So.
Okay. Well, I believe that the reason why they can meet the speed of light is because their technology is anti-gravitatory. So, again, when we discussed gravity at first, we understood that everything is vectorial, and they are able to just grab, and the space and time ahead, their own spacecraft. So there's no physical limitations because they understand the geometrical patterns that create this fabric of the universe of space and time.
So would you say the universe is geometric?
Yes, it is. It is.
And would you also say it's binary?
Binary has
to be black or white, one or two, one or the other, 0 or 1. In other words, a series of choices.
Yeah.
Of one or the other. Of like things is what creates.
I mean, that's a principle of the universe. That's a principle: polarity, duality, etc., trinity, oneness. But yeah, it will go on with that. So, yeah.
Do you believe in like numerology? Do you think that sets out a pattern?
Yes.
Do you think I think there's good numerologists and there's crappy numerologists.
Yes.
But you do. So you think someone who practices it the right way can predict things about your life?
I'm not sure about predicting, but I'm sure about understanding the patterns of frequency behind numbers and digits, symbols, etc.
Okay. So have you been, let's talk about the secret space program stuff, because we all know there's secret space programs. Yes. Anybody who follows this subject, the question is who, what faction, what technology do they have? I know that we developed anti-gravity technology here in the United States probably in 1960, because if you look at the speed of transportation, it goes, from a guy walking to a guy on a horse to a horse and buggy to a steam train to a propeller airplane to a jet airplane to a rocket, and then this curve that's going straight up in terms of speed just goes completely flatlines for the last 70 years, 60 years. So do you think that or what do you know about this? Do you think that there is more than one secret space program? Does every country have one? And are there different countries working with different alien factions?
Absolutely. The secret space program comes originally from Germany.
Okay.
After Second World War.
Yeah.
And after many of the Germans took off that anti-gravity technology in Operation Paperclip, for example, where they went into the United States and they started working with the CIA, that's where many of the different factions of the space program were created, First of all, the German one and then the American one, right? And after that, they obviously took over the world. And each country does have its own faction, but not every country has a bigger representation in the space program. It's just a matter of relevance. But yeah, China, for example, and Spain, my own country.
Right.
I
Well,
do know.
so then like China would align with certain alien groups, and America
Exactly.
would be aligned with other ones. That kind of thing.
Exactly.
Germany would be aligned with another
Hmm.
one. So did Germany actually lose World War II, or did they just go underground?
They never lose World War II. In fact, that's why the technology was being given to them, because they understood that to win the war, they needed it. So, yeah, from the perspective of the outside, our historical context, they might have lost, but they actually break away from our civilization.
Do you believe these stories of the secret space program technology being skirted away to Africa, or not Africa, Antarctica?
Yes,
You
absolutely.
think those are true?
Yes, I have had experiences with them.
Have you, in your travels, whether they're astral or physical, have you ever been to Antarctica?
Yes,
And
I've
is
been.
it as they describe it? Are there underground like cities and gardens and all that stuff there?
Yes, that's
Okay.
the inner Earth.
Okay, in the inner Earth.
Hmm.
Okay, so here's the big question. Is the Earth spherical or is it flat?
Spherical.
Thank you. Thank you. Because nothing makes sense if it's not spherical, right? Because
Yeah.
everything, when you observe, everything is spinning, and that creates a spherical shape. So yeah, obviously.
Yes.
Good stuff. Okay, so let's talk about different planets in the solar system, if you know.
Hmm.
What is your impression, or what do you know about what's on the moon?
For what I understand and what I have experienced, there are bases of extraterrestrial consciousness, mostly grays and reptilians, that utilizes as a form of like an observatory for Earth, And there's a lot of slavery, of other groups of extraterrestrials that they consider that they're not worthy or other place within the hierarchy of the universe genetically. And there are a lot of space program groups that are utilizing it to, a bunch of military operations. So yeah, I mean, that's
So it's just a base that aliens use. Now are they fighting up there, or are they not fighting?
not really. No.
So are there agreements
Yes.
that we're all that, like, because I mean, technically Antarctica, we supposedly have
Yes.
agreements that everybody shares it and nobody gets to control. Is this the same thing with the moon?
Yeah, it is the same thing with the moon, but there have been wars in Antarctica. Now, I'm not an specialist in them, but I know that they're having, conflicts, and
Conflicts
confrontations.
and confrontations. Like conflicts and confrontations.
Exactly.
Okay. Why does the moon exist as it does? In other words, the only other comparable pairing would be Venus and Mercury, which there is a theory of how planets form, which nobody really knows yet, where Mercury because of some big cataclysm, got spun away from Venus. But as you look around the solar system, there's no comparable situation where you have two bodies of such similar size so close together. So how did it get here, and what was it? Was its initial purpose? Was it used to slow down the spin of the Earth to make life better here, or what?
Moon?
Yeah.
I believe that, well, there are many different theories, right? I've heard that it was brought here in order to bring balance to that feminine versus masculine energy.
I've heard that too, yeah.
And then I heard that it was brought so that they will have just a base, to observe Earth. But I think it has to do definitely more with the astrological science behind our systems of planetary different archetypals, So
yeah, because that's the physics that's going to define, it defines personality among many other things, right?
Exactly.
So I mean, I that's true. When I meet someone, I instantly know if they're a Libra or not. I know if they're an Aquarian, how I get along with them. But it's really interesting. So are they? If the moon wasn't here, would human life flourish on the Earth still? Because it does govern our spin energy a lot.
Well, I cannot answer that definitely, but I believe so.
Okay. All right. Just curious if you had any, it's like stuff. You talk to people I haven't talked to, so I want to get some of my questions answered. All right, let's move on to Mars. What do you think is going on Mars right now, and what's the history that you know of it?
Well, I know that there were wars also on Mars. Again, I'm not a specialist in universal wars of that kind, planetary ones. I know a lot about Earth specifically. But what I know about Mars so far, like in the current state that it is, I know that there are a lot of secret space program bases,
Mm-hmm.
and that is mostly for technological and scientific purposes.
Okay.
So it's not more like the moon, that is more like, slavery and military operations, like control. It's more much relaxed,
Mars is more fun
Yes.
than the moon. Okay.
Yes, I will say that.
That's pretty well established. Do you believe there's a lot of people in the industry,
Yeah.
as we call it, the UFO industry?
Yes.
Oh, I went to Mars. I served for 20 years with Barack Obama on Mars and fought the reptilians and a lot of stuff. Do you believe any of those stories, or
I mean, I think some of them are real, but I think that most people are picking upon memories that maybe they are either mixing, like, with other aspects of their past lives,
Mhm.
and in many other cases there are screen memories, because there's real information in these programs and these military operations
Right.
and scientific research that they just don't want people to remember and bring up into the discussion. So they would just rather entertain people with, oh, I fought reptilians and da da da, like,
How do
okay.
you know that your memories are not screen memories?
I can tell because I have been trained as a psychic super soldier, so I have great discernment.
Okay.
That was part of the
So discipline and discernment. No, in other words, how to interpret what the information is coming to you.
exactly.
Okay. So where else is a good hotspot in the solar system? I mean, again, I don't want to put you on a spot with things you really haven't talked about, but like Iapetus is a moon of Saturn, and it's really weird. I mean, it looks like a geometric. The horizon is not curved. It's a series of geometric lines, all equal. And so, are there any like artificial satellites in the solar system?
Absolutely. There are more than one. And again, it's a matter of purposes,
Mm-hmm.
mostly military oriented, or yeah.
Okay. How many? We get different people giving us different counts. Oh, there's 57 alien species visiting the Earth. There's 20. Oh, there's only 3. There's only 2 or 3 fighting over the Earth. How many alien species do you think are visiting the Earth like right now today?
Oh God. I wouldn't be able to tell a number because the agreements and the changes have been shifting over the time.
Mhm.
So, I mean, at the beginning, there were it was a reduced group of them,
Mhm.
like reptilians, draconians, Anunnaki, some Pleiadians, etc. But of course, as time has went by, there were introductions of some of them, and as many genetic iterations as we have, obviously that took part of the reason why it changed. So I can't say a specific number, but yeah, it's
Well,
not.
okay, so like
Yeah,
tens, hundreds, thousands, millions?
I would say hundreds, but not all of them are able to interact directly with our experience or with our civilization.
Okay. So what like being around us
Yeah, like
is painful
directly.
for them or difficult for they just
No, there are beings that are just not interested, or they're dependent of our position in the earth and in the universe. They just do not. They would like to preserve our free will and our own the reality that we have decided collectively to construct in here. Like, it was a collective consensus
Mhm.
to not allow interference directly. Although we do have interference, but
Yeah.
you know
Well,
that
there's
people.
groups breaking the
Yes,
agreements, clearly, yeah.
exactly.
So these different groups that are fighting over us. See, I guess we can get into that philosophical aspect of it later, but I feel like we're very important.
Yes,
And I think it's our genetics that are important because
yes,
our genetics enable us to do certain things that other species can't do. You look at the grays, they're very dead. They have no souls to speak of. And you've told me, I think before, you can expand on this, that there's lots of different types of grays, but they're abducting women, and they're doing their hybrid experiments. And I know personally someone who I know as well as or better than you, and she's told me her story, and it's completely believable. Not
yeah,
because she's not crazy. I mean, um, And so about this whole hybrid baby thing. So it feels like to me, like they're trying to become what we are, and they think they can do it by stealing our DNA, which I think is completely wrong because it's not physical; it's something else. Do you
Yes.
agree with that or no?
I agree with it.
Okay, so if the question is, how do you stop this, or are we screwed because our government sold us out back in the 50s? You know, the Eisenhower stuff.
Well, the government, because of their position, yes, of course, they were able to engage in agreements with these beings and
Mhm.
basically sold us out, as you say. But let's not forget that we are individuals and we have our own free will and sovereignty. So we cannot really believe, that there are other entities, no matter how much power they represent in our civilization or society, that can actually impose another force or these entities to take away that free will. So again, yes, we were manipulated, we were taken over, we were abducted, and it was part of that. But if you're told that you cannot retrieve that you cannot come back to that state of empowering yourself and allowing these beings to be part of your experience, you're being gaslighted.
Okay, that's a lie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does someone, because I've done several shows on this stuff, and I remember for a show I did in 2013 that there was we went to do a test case. They wanted to just see how the show worked, and we met a lady from London. We went to London and we met with her, and she had been having abduction experiences for, I think, most of her life, and she was a client of Daryl Sims, who is a very intense, doesn't like aliens very much, calls it the alien, wants to chop them up and eat them like sushi and that kind of thing. But as we questioned her, I questioned her. It was my job to be skeptical and stuff. And she said, all I want is for this to end. I don't want this in my life. I didn't ask for this. I don't want it. I want it to end. How can she take that power back and put an end to it then? Because I don't know. I didn't know what to tell her. My co-star, Stephen Jones, rest in peace, Stephen, we love you, said, I can assure you we're going to put a stop to this. And I'm like, dude, you can't tell her that, because how do you do that? So how would you think you could do that? Is it a combination of meditation, prayer, attaching yourself to a higher, lighter being? How do you do that?
Shifting belief systems, definitely. When you sustain or support a specific belief or statement about yourself, you are molding your own neural networks. So that opens off neural pathways for them, thought patterns that vibrationally match up with the idea of interference or overpowering you. So you really have to work with your subconscious. You really have to work with your own belief systems. And if you're able to shift them and you're able to mold your brain around them, there are really no vibrational match to that kind of manifestation of experience. And that is physics and metaphysics. So it's straight away that path.
So that almost sounds like self-talk. You have to self-talk them out of it. Like, you will not take me tonight. Something like that? Or
yes, but it's more powerful than that, because when you self-talk, you're just meditating or thinking, overthinking, whatever. I'm talking about a real shift within yourself about beliefs, about statements, on your reality and your place in the universe.
It's 3:33, by the way. Well,
Oh.
brought that subject up. Perfect. Which is hyperdimensional.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So, but what would? Okay, so that's very interesting. But like, what is there anything? Is it speaking? I mean, to me, that there's a lot of people that think that it has to be a sound vibration to make a difference. Is that important that you speak these words, or is it just thoughts that matter?
It is ideas that matter.
Yeah.
Everything in the universe is fundamentally conceptual and ideal.
Okay. Do you think that someone like her had a contract and agreed to this work before she was ever born, and so she's stuck with it? Or can you break a contract, a soul contract that you made?
Absolutely. I mean, there was a aspect of her consciousness that made this agreement on a higher level. But just because it was made, it doesn't mean that you do not have the power to shift it right away. And now there will be many people that will say, oh, well, yes, but if it keeps happening, it's because, on a higher level, you're still agreeing with it. That's not true, because there's not such a difference. There's not a definitive line that separates your higher mind from your conscious self or your lower self. So even though the higher mind is very responsible of the majority of your soul contracts, you're still not separated. So, for example, if you in your physical dimension here in your 3D life decide or think about the fact that you no longer want to take part in these experiments or programs, you are getting that not just from your ego, but from your higher mind itself. So it's bidirectional, the communication between the higher mind and your mind.
We would say bidirectional.
Bidirectional.
I don't mean it, though. Yeah, no, it's
Yes.
the accent thing.
Yes.
Okay, so it doesn't matter then if you have a contract.
Yeah.
That, because you have free will to break that contract,
Yes.
right? And do something different, align with somebody else. What happens to your soul after you die in this physical plane? What do you think about that?
Well, your soul goes into a different dimension. In this case, it will be the 5th dimension, where there is no such thing as linear time, and you're vibrating in the core vibration of the universe, which is unconditional love. And so at that time, you have reintegrated yourself with your higher mind, your subconscious mind, your subconscious one, and you are in peace, let's say. Now, how the process goes through will be different depending on each individual's belief system. That's why there are many Christian believers that will say that there is a light within the tunnel and you see Jesus and God and heaven and stuff like that. And there will be like pagans and non-religious people that will say, well, no, I had a different experience. I was with my loved ones that passed away. So it depends on your own set of belief systems.
Right. It's because of your you get what you expect. Like I've heard people say, oh, I woke up and I was in hell and all this stuff. And, they describe basically hell. And it's like probably because some deep down in your mind, you think you're a bad person. And
exactly.
Yeah. So I really have felt that for a long time, that it was all driven by your expectations. So when you get there, is your personality from this lifetime intact? In other words, do I stay Mike Barrett until I decide to incarnate as somebody else again? Is that how that works?
Well, the personality is a 3rd dimensional construct, and so what you mean is specifically will be the identity, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm an identical twin, so identity is my biggest issue in life, right?
Okay.
This is my identity and I'm not giving it up. So so I am curious about that. That's
yes.
Okay.
Your core identity goes with your soul. But the aspect of your personality or your identity that are lower vibration gets released, gets let go of.
Yeah, the bad stuff you brought.
Exactly. It integrates back into its place.
If you do bad things, if you hurt people, if you're mean to them, if you kicked a cat, when you were a kid, so when you get to the next level, you can let go of all that stuff. Is that what the life review thing is all about? And does that actually happen?
You do have a life review, and you're shown the decisions that you could all have made, in the moment, and the different paths that it will have led you to or towards. So yes, there is that life review, and you become self-aware, of the positive and the negative.
Okay. What good is all that if you can't go back and change any of it?
Well, it is all about self-realization, understanding what you are, who you are, the things that you learn about who you are, and the things that you should work for in the next incarnation that you left unresolved.
So I think in this physical universe, my opinion is that the physical forward movement of everything in the universe is what creates reality.
Yeah.
If everything stopped moving in this spiraling dynamic torsional movement, then the universe would stop and everything would end.
Mm-hmm.
So can you, in the next realm, wherever it is, can you you can't ever go back, or is time, because you said time isn't linear, but if I can't go back
Mm-hmm.
to a previous point of this life and make a better decision, then isn't time linear?
Yes and no. Time is not linear in the sense of that everything's dynamical. You shift from one point of a space and time to another one.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a sense of continuity, and there is a geometrical pattern that you are creating in your experience of all those points of a space and time. So yes, you can shift yourself to a parallel reality of that supposed past, maybe 2014, and change something, but that will not change your current experience past. It might change your timeline, but not your past.
Okay, so I can't go up there, say, oh, I really screwed that up, I want to go back down to 2009 and buy Bitcoin on a different timeline and then live out that timeline. I can't do that.
Technically no, because it was,
So
yeah.
and I'm not arguing with you though specifically, because a lot of people share your opinion, right? I mean,
Yes.
most people do.
Yes.
But to me, I've never accepted it.
Mm-hmm.
Because that means that time is linear. That means if you can't go back and change something and have a
Mm-hmm.
different experience, time is linear. Now, I've also heard that there's like 8 different time loops for every person. And if every person is creating the universe
Mm-hmm.
completely through their thoughts and actions and creation, then we have an infinite number of universes and combinations.
Mm-hmm.
And do you agree with that basic thing, or do you think it's way more loops than that, or way fewer loops, or do you even believe in the concept of the loops?
I haven't researched about if it's age specifically or not, but
Right.
I do believe 100% in the multiverse theory.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's a different Mike Barrett and Marina Seren somewhere else doing something completely different, or they may not even know each other, right?
Exactly.
We don't even...
There are infinite quantum probabilities and possibilities,
okay,
not just millions.
But then, so is this the sole real creation of everyone's shared experience, or is it just my shared experience?
It's yours.
So yours right now is your shared experience.
Exactly. And you do not know where I am at. So you manifest all the points of space and time of me that match that created reality on your end. But you do not know what kind of a specific pattern, geometrical pattern connection I'm making out of those,
So if there's no universal agreed upon reality, then anything's possible.
Exactly. Anything.
And nothing matters. Does it? I mean, doesn't that kind of imply that nothing really then matters? Because you can always have a different experience.
Yes, but the things that in this situation we could take upon the idea of higher probabilities. And those higher probabilities are mostly influenced by your karmic predisposition, your belief system, your own cycles of evolution. So there are factors that will take a lot of charge and responsibility in that. So
right. Now, the other night we were drinking beer and playing blackjack and arguing about karma.
Yes.
And so I want to get into the discussion of what your thoughts are on karma. So I'm going to throw mine out there, and then you can tell me why you think I'm wrong.
Okay.
So I think that with karma, that it is the sum total of the bad things you've done. I mean, I feel like as a soul, you have karma and grace. You have the things that you did right, where you helped and made other people happy, and you have the things you did wrong. So that's your karma. But I'm very firmly along with the belief of you get what you expect when you pass away, at least your initial experience of death. If you believe I'm a Christian, but I was a bad Christian, and I cheated on my wife once or something, and so I go to hell. But then if you forgive yourself for that, you get out of hell. You get out of that. So that I think that karma is only the stuff that you don't forgive yourself for, you have to go back and make up for. You don't agree with that, I don't think, but you want to elaborate?
Okay, yes. I would like to say that yes, it's true that forgiveness has to do a lot with that release of karma. Now, I do not believe that just with the idea of forgiving oneself, you might let go of that karma. because there are aspects of it, the concept, and the construct that you might have to re-experience from the side of the victim or the other side, in order to understand why. And what is the question specifically? Why did you hold on that belief system that created that whole construct and scenario for yourself that limited yourself?
So, okay, if I'm a serial killer who likes to eat my victims' livers with some fava beans and a nice Chianti, if I say, okay, well, that's okay, I forgive myself. I know how I got there because of these things that happened to me that were actually outside of my control. So I forgive myself. Therefore, I don't have to be killed by one of my victims who plays the opposite role later on. You're saying that that's not necessarily true. You're not going to be able to escape it just by forgiving yourself, because
it depends. That's what I'm trying to say. If you have truly understood and reintegrated all the limiting aspects of the experience and the contract itself, then yes, you're good to go, because karma is not about punishment. It's about, a natural law of the universe of, back and forth, so that you can get integrated.
So Christians like to say, and I have a great deal of respect for Christians, and I talk to Jesus a lot. I think he's a cool guy. I tried to talk him into coming here on Halloween dressed as Jesus and going around and performing miracles, but he said, no, the same thing would just happen to me. That happened to me before. He doesn't want to do that. So, the concept of that is that you're forgiven for everything. So if you're forgiven, why do you have to suffer the consequences? I have a friend who had a T-shirt that said, "Fuck karma. I don't even know the next guy. He's not going to be me." So, do you believe in that universal concept that you can be forgiven? And if so, then why do you are you saying that you decide that you're going to experience the karma from your negative aspects?
No, it's not a matter of decision. It's a matter of all the different layers of the construct itself, as I was saying. So it's not just about, if you have integrated all of them, then you're good to go, as I was saying.
Right. And you move on to the next thing.
Exactly. It's not about punishment again.
Okay. So, but a lot of Christians say good always triumphs over evil because the universe is all love. And I don't know that I agree with that. I look around at people who are still getting away with some of the shit they're getting away with on this planet. And I don't know if that's alien influences or, that are helping them, making them more powerful or whatever. But I don't think the universe, let's call it God. I prefer to just say God. I know that has a male connotation, but I don't think God gives a shit about good over evil. I think that God only cares about balance, that in the end, everything has to be balanced. And that's what the universe is trying to achieve at all times. Do you agree with that?
I agree with it, although I do not believe that so-called God has a mind that thinks for itself, I do think it's all that is. So it holds every single perspective. So things like caring or preferring does not really fit in,
Right. So do you think that if things get too far out of balance on the light side or the dark side, to use Star Wars, as an example, that there's a correction made, like some higher power takes action to correct it?
I do not believe that it might be necessarily like a higher power as like entities that have a higher degree of evolution, but rather universal energies.
Okay. So there are Hopi legends that say that the Earth, we've been this advanced before. And if you look at the timeline of humanity in terms of when we've had, we started eating red meat and sugarcane, and our higher brains developed. And if you look at that timeline, there's plenty of time in there for a technological civilization to evolve and to fall, and to evolve and to fall. And the Hopis say that there's been 4 previous worlds of man, and this is the 5th. And, now it's like, but all those have ended. And the reason they ended is because they got out of alignment with God's desires for man. That's what they say, basically. And the Earth has been destroyed by fire, by water, by, nuclear wars, whatever it is. So do you think that concept is real? Because I'm going to tell you, when I started out looking at structures on Mars and looking at them on the moon, and I'm looking at this stuff and I see human engineering. I see engineering. So either engineering principles are universal. In other words, how far do you space things apart and how strong do they have to be to support them? And why is there a humanoid looking face on Mars if humans aren't from Mars and so on?
Exactly.
So do you believe that that concept is correct? And do you attribute the disasters, the floods, the fires, whatever, do you attribute that to God saying, okay, you guys are out of control?
Absolutely no.
Okay.
Absolutely. I will attribute it to the higher fractal consciousness, Anunnakis and entities that have a role in our reality, in our planetary consciousness, that tend to decide, for us, depending on what is their specific agenda. And that's why we have such a thing as wars and conflicts among gods and deities.
So you don't think that we'd kind of take a poll in the background of all the souls on Earth and they're like, this really isn't working out. Bring in the asteroid. That doesn't work.
Exactly. No, it's not the universe. Look at other planets.
Right. Well, Venus is a pretty effed up place. Venus used to be a real garden spot and now it's a mess. So there's a lot of fear out there right now, and there always has been. When I wrote this book, The Choice, in 2010, I went through all this stuff about pole shifts and all these things that people believe, and it's like, there's, as far as I know from the evidence that's available, that's really not true. There's been some bad stuff that happened. The Younger Dryas impact event, which was obviously probably a comet hitting the North Pole area, right? And probably caused 40 days and 40 nights of rain. So you do have these things happen. But do you think that they're just purely random, or is there some specific plan behind it?
I do believe in a very intelligent design of all the astronomical movements of the Earth, the solar system, and every component of it. So obviously it's not casual, it's not random, and the pole shifts are actually very related to these different cycles of energy and evolution for humanity.
Right.
So of course there must be a group of beings that at the beginning, they designed a whole solar system and its movements, and they just set it for to be a plan, like a scenario for entities that desire to evolve and create a playground for interactions with different levels of density of consciousness. And take a role, and just,
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk aliens. I got an Alienware computer right there. We do not get any sponsorship from Alienware, just so everybody knows.
Yes.
So we talked about, reptilians and draconians. You mentioned about an hour ago, it seems like, right? So how can there be? I always thought draconians were reptilians, and they were the evil ones, the bad ones that just ate people for lunch and did all that terrible stuff. But you're suggesting there's two different kinds. So can you elaborate on that a little bit? Let's start with them.
Reptilians and draconians are not just two sides, like it's not a dichotomy of them. I just believe though that they do have different I don't know, like they're part of the same species, but they're not the same races. It's similar to like humans and Anunnakis, And well, the ones that we know as to the Dracos, they are of a higher place within the hierarchy of genetics. They present themselves as to be more of a royal bloodline. And the reptilians will be more related to the Orion constellation, and they do not perceive themselves, or the universe do not, the empires do not perceive them to be that much more advanced.
Okay.
That's the generic perspective or take on it.
But they would both appear similar if you were to encounter one.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And before we go too much farther with the alien stuff, let's talk about this. Is there, like, people talk about there's a galactic federation of light, or it's a galactic like federation. It's like a Monty Python movie or something when you listen to these people talk. Is there really a consortium of habitable intelligent species and worlds that sort of police this part of the galaxy?
That is correct. Although there's no just one single one.
Right.
Because there are different factions, like in everywhere. So they'll have different politics and agendas altogether.
Everybody has, like, I believe the purpose of existence is to end up closer to God than when you were incarnated.
Yes.
That's my belief about why we're even here. And that every race has a different way of getting there. Like they choose a different path. Our path, I believe, was free will. I don't know what the Gray's path was. So do you agree with that? And like, what is the Gray's path, if, as an example?
Well, the Gray's path, that's something that only then can answer specifically. But it's true that it will not definitely resolve itself by stealing genetics from us.
Yeah, that's not going to work, guys.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to take something ethereal and
Yes.
fix it with something physical, and it's just not even going to do it. It's like, oh, I'm really hungry. I'm going to eat a rock. You know, it's not going to work.
Well, the thing is that they were given the possibility of a different path, a different outcome for the race evolution to not die out and distinguish. But they took advantage of that. And now they want Earth. Now they want to come here back. So, you know, that's the dilemma that they have, that they are observing that we are not going to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Do you believe, some people like to think that, oh, they're time travelers from the future, that they're just us after we've physically desiccated and we have our heads are bigger, but our bodies are smaller. Do you believe that that's true, or they're completely separate species?
There are various kinds of Grays.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't be able to tell if they come, all of them, from a parallel future of humanity that destroy themselves, such as, other channelers will sustain. But, they're the ones who are not even truly biological, So, yeah, I mean, it depends on what is specific faction. Again, it's all about faction.
Okay, let's, again, you don't like the Grays very much.
No.
So why don't we get into that specifically?
Yes.
What do you want to say about them? And let's start with just, what do you want to tell people about the Grays that they don't know? Because there are certain abductees out there, like Whitley, who I have a great deal of respect. Whitley, if you see this, I really respect you. But he's kind of like, oh, they're ultimately they're here for our good kind of a thing. Do you agree with that?
No, of course no. In fact, the Greys are the entities that are the less respected and taken seriously in the galaxy, because they're not to trust. Like, whenever there's an agreement, they always create trickery within the agreement and violate parts of it, terms of the conditions. So nobody trusts them. That's the point.
Wow, the Greys are notoriously unreliable. I hear when they drink, they really are not fun to be around.
Yeah.
Okay, so nobody trusts them. They have like short man syndrome, right? They always want to fight. They always want to. They're sneaky.
They're very sneaky.
They're like Klingons. They're not good. And I don't mean to make light of it, because they are here. They are abducting a lot of people. They are creating a lot of unhappiness on the planet. Why doesn't another species who's more powerful kick them off the planet? Why are they still allowed to roam around here? Or are they just sneaking through the defensive shields and stuff and getting in here?
Well, that is because they cannot interfere in other species agreements. So if they observe that humanity is interacting with them and they haven't still developed that, consciousness, that responsibility about themselves, they will just understand that it is up to us to just grow up, and understand that, claim back our sovereignty.
So other people say, just to get slightly off target here, that there's an embargo on the planet Earth, and we can't leave Earth. Is that true?
I mean, yes and no. We're not completely limited to Earth. We can take other incarnations, but the thing is that the soul has a lot of experience taking on this planet and the themes of exploration of consciousness of this planet. We are part of a collective consciousness too. So we're not just dealing with individual karma, we're dealing with collective karma. So there's a big magnetism that will make us grow and farther if we decide to continue along with this planet, with our own kind.
So is there a giant soul catcher on the moon that captures all the souls trying to escape the Earth
and
throws them back?
Absolutely no.
Okay, good. Wanted to check on that one.
No.
you hear a lot of these crazy stories. Can a human being incarnate as something else in the next life? Like if I go up there and decide, yeah, I don't want to do the human thing anymore. I want to be a reptilian and have really big muscles. Can I do that, or do you generally tend to incarnate along the same pattern? Like have I mostly been human, let's say, in my lives?
There are cases in which when a consciousness has transcended those limiting beliefs and the topics of exploration that they wanted to take on Earth to learn and expand further, they will be able eventually to take on another body and another species.
Okay.
But it is not usually the case.
Wow. So in other words, if you pick human, you stay human as you go through your lifetimes, for the most part.
For the most part, yes.
Okay. That's interesting. Well, because I kind of like being human. There's a lot of advantages to it.
Yes.
Again, we're just getting off aliens here, but then we get into some other stuff I want to ask you about. Is it true that like at the next level, at let's say, the fifth 5D, whatever you want to call it, that there's like no eating and there's no anything else like that. Like there's not physical stuff, like you don't have to eat, you don't have to consume dead flesh to survive. So it's a different physical experience than this one?
Absolutely, yes. There is a point in existence and evolution when you have transcended the need to take energy out of matter. But it's not about matter versus energy only. It's about the nutrients, the vitamins, the aspects of the layers of consciousness that the vegetable world and the animal kingdom of the second density can offer to you, right? For your own evolution. Because when you're eating and when you're developing and evolving your own, let's say, your habit, your food habits, it's just not about sugar or fats or whatever, learning how to be healthier, but learning from how do you gather that nutrients and that information from other entities from life. Because when you take plants, when you take vegetables, and when you take animals, there's an energetic exchange in there.
Yeah. But the thing is, it's really funny is that, again, as I research different books I've written, there's no difference between plants and animals in terms of their experience of death. In other words, when you have a thought with an intention, and there's experiments that prove this, that I'm going to eat this, I'm going to chop up this celery or dig up this carrot and chop it up and eat it. It scares the shit out of it. Just like it would if you took the cows to the slaughterhouse and they saw all their friends being slaughtered.
Yeah.
So do you think that the whole, let's ask about the vegans. Are the vegans like really a little too self-important? I mean, they're not, it's like plants and animals fear just as much. Don't they experience just as much fear of dying as any of us?
The point is that it doesn't have to do so much with whether if it's moral or not. It's about the energy exchange, because plants are second density and animals are third density, which means that if you're intaking meat, for example, you are in the process, in the equation that is created, you have more of the fear frequencies intaken and replicated into your own consciousness. Why? Because simply, the animals of the third density, they have more of an evolution of the ego consciousness. So in this case, there is more fear beliefs that they can experience in their own reality, in their own evolution. So you are exchanging that. There's more fear in that equation of exchange of energy.
So we have to eat at this level, which I wish we didn't. I mean, my question is, if you could ask God a question, what would it be? It's like, why do we have to eat animals to survive?
Yes.
You're saying it's so that because we learn from the experience of the different varieties that we
exactly
intake.
Yes.
Wow.
So I'm not saying that eating meat is negative. I'm just saying that it is needed for the majority of us right now.
Clearly it's needed. There's people who call themselves the sun eaters. And they claim that all they do is stand there and open themselves up to the sun and never eat or drink anything, and they live to be 80, 90 years old just like the rest of us. Do you believe that? Because I think it's horseshit myself.
It's horseshit.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. They're sneaking Snickers bars.
Yeah, it's been proven that most of those people actually eat a little bit, and they call that breatharianism. That's not breatharianism.
A little bit. Yeah. Well, if you're eating a little bit, you're still eating.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to aliens again. And sorry about, we're kind of bouncing all over the place, but I just think something I want to talk to you about your experience and what you think. Okay, so let's talk about, there is rumors that Donald Trump, the current president and former president of the United States, is married to a Pleiadian, that she is a non-human. And it is really interesting because Melania, there is footage. I think we talked about this the other night. There's footage of the State of the Union address in 2020, which is President Trump's last State of the Union, first State of the Union, first term, and that there was a plot to murder him there. And when you go through and I've had lip readers, people who are pretty good, read the lips of the conversation, because they're on camera for an hour before the speech even starts, and it's all shown on various C-SPAN networks and things like that here, and you can see people talking back and forth. And one of them says to the one congressman says, Democrat says to a Republican, yeah, he thinks his Pleiadian can protect him, but we're going to get her too. So do you think that there's any truth to that? She is very exotic looking, but do you think that that's true? And does she look like your experience of what Pleiadian females might look like?
I do not believe that. I don't believe that he's necessarily married to one of them. Now, where if he's connected to them, of course he is. I know that he's working with Nordics, Pleiadians, the Andromedan Council, and he's just discussing with SSP factions, Solar Garden. So again, I don't know if that statement is true, but I do not believe it.
Okay, well, and but it's interesting that people in Congress apparently believed it, because I swear to God, that's what they're saying, right? And there was another incident where when he first got elected in 2016, he goes up on stage and they're all he's clapping, and he's there with Barron, his son, by Melania, who is a very unusual looking person and appears to be a time traveler. And he turns to her and he said, and he's looking at the cheering crowd, and he turns to her and he said, "This is just like peering through your time machine." And I can't think of anything else he could be saying. So do you think that's true? Do you think, is there time technology out there? Let's ask that one. Is there time technology?
Yes, of course there's time technology.
But you can't move back in time, but you can observe timelines?
No, you can actually time travel, and you can interfere. Now, it's not the typical conception of the butterfly effect that it has presented to us. Like, if you change something in the past, it will, provoke like a butterfly effect, no, because you're talking about dynamic timelines. So it's not your past that you're changing. It's another timeline's past,
Okay.
Yes.
So I could go back and tell myself, don't marry that one. I could say that.
Yeah, but you still had your own path.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. All right. You mentioned Nordics. Tell me about the Nordics.
Yes. Well, the Nordics are factions of ETs that come from Aldebaran system, Tara constellation. And so far, I know that there are those who are very positive aligned, very neutral, and those who are neutral but can have or can experience great amount of connectionness, and empathy. And there are other factions, of course, although this is a minority, that are in contact with the Draconians. So, yeah.
So, we talked before. We've talked before where you said that, there's this sort of idea that all reptilians are bad.
Yeah.
And all Nordics are good because, they're pure and they're pretty and they're attractive and all this stuff. But you said before that those characteristics are not true, that there are good grays and bad grays. There are good reptilians and bad reptilians, and there are good Pleiadians and bad Pleiadians, right?
Exactly. Like, we can only talk from our own perspective and scenario. But one species is not inherently negative or positive,
Okay. Yeah. There's good people and bad people everywhere. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So you mentioned also Orion.
Yes.
First of all, I have two questions about the Orions. What is their main thing, and like what's their perspective, and are they green like they were on Star Trek?
Well, yes, there are various races of Orion people that are green skinned,
Oh.
even amphibious one, reptilian ones. And well, what I know about them is that they're very positive Orion people that are here in our constellation, and they have pretty good connections to our genetics. We have Orion DNA within us. Now, there's also a lot of information in regards to the Orion Wars and how what many of the souls that are here are re-experiencing the themes of corruption, tyranny within our governments, and basically that idea of like dictatorship,
Yeah,
basically.
we're certainly experiencing a lot of corruption in the government right now, for sure. Yeah.
So those are like karmic cycles of evolution that even though like a lot of time has passed by, they are experienced, within collectives and within the genetics that they're spread around the universe.
Okay, so you talked about the Andromedans. You mentioned them from the Andromeda galaxy, I guess, which seems like kind of a lot. I mean, I would think their galaxy is big enough that it would be interesting to just hang out there, but I don't know. But there's an abductee, a fairly famous guy named Alex Collier, who was the first one to really talked about. And I used to love to listen to his stuff. I'm like, I'm not sure if this guy's making this all up, but he's really interesting to listen to. But he talks about that they're blue-skinned Andromedans, but they look pretty human. It's not the avian bird people that Corey Good talks about. So tell me about the Andromedans and what their perspective is, because he was pretty adamant that they were just here to help out as they could.
That is true. I have to say that those are the ones that I met for the first time when I initiated my spiritual path. And Alex Collier got synchronistically into my attention. So I have consumed a lot of the knowledge and information.
He's given some great lectures. He's given some great ones.
Absolutely, yes. And so I do have connections with the Andromedan Council. And I am aware that they are working with the Pope, because I have been there, in the non-physical.
The new Pope?
Yes. No, the other one.
The
one that passed away.
Pope.
Yes,
okay.
The old Pope. Yes.
So the old Pope was a good guy, not a bad guy?
The thing is that we tried to talk to him, along with the Vril people, the Vril maidens. And we were discussing about Earth's, evolution and decisions to be made within our governments. And, he was pretty hard to talk with and discuss about things, because he had a lot of contracts with and agreements and whatnot, with the people around him in the Vatican, and he was highly influenced. Now, he would just not collaborate that much, and that put him in the position that he ended up in. So, unfortunately, it is what it is.
Just as long as we're on the Vatican, do you believe the stories that the gold has been repatriated from the Vatican to different places around the world? Have you heard that one?
I haven't heard about that, but I hardly believe it.
Do you feel like that the Vatican is losing the power that it held over the Earth?
Absolutely.
Right.
Obviously.
Because we're moving from the occulted age of Pisces, where everything's been secret, into Aquarius. If we're not there already, do you think there's a very stringent time, like where we've moved from one to the other? Have we hit that yet?
Yeah, I think it was mostly in 2020 and 2012.
I think that's what I think the 2012 thing was that's the real marker for moving from Pisces to Aquarius. So
absolutely.
So and most people, the word apocalypse is used. I don't know what's the Spanish word for apocalypse?
Apocalipsis.
Apocalipsis. Okay, did I get that right?
Yes.
All right, I messed that up. And people don't understand, and this is one of the things I put in the choice, which we've talked a lot about today, is that apocalypse doesn't mean catastrophe. It doesn't mean disaster.
Exactly.
It means to lift the veil, to reveal the truth, right? And so we see a period now where there's all kinds of truth coming out about everything.
Yes. So. It's like Ragnarok or Armageddon.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have any faith in the the UFO congressional hearings and the people that are there? Do you have any faith in any of those?
Well, let me tell
You
you.
don't have to name names if you don't
Okay,
want
okay.
to get on anybody's bad side.
Sure, let me tell you something. I was working with them I was astrally in the White House, recruited many times within the years of 2020 to 2021. And they asked me for my advice, for my knowledge. They said, how would you proceed with this, with disclosure? And when I noticed that there were still groups that were conflicted because some of them were very deep state connected and wanted to control the disclosure narrative, and that some of them truly wanted like change, but were very disempowered. They didn't have still the tools or the predisposition to just arrange something bigger. That's when I just left, those, like my co-creation with them, because I understood that they were utilizing mind control tools and they were not going to let go all of the truth and be blunt about it. They were going to try to control the disclosure narrative.
There's definitely, that's the thing about the concept of disclosure. I don't want disclosure because first of all, I don't trust a thing that my government tells me. Right. So disclosure is a controlled narrative of this is what we want you to think about these aliens, what they're here, why they're here, what they're doing. And again, they're here for our own good and all this other crap. And it's like, we don't know that. They're here for their own agenda, they're not here to help us. They're here to do what they're getting something out of it for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay. So one thing is, if you do talk to them again, can you tell them they need to talk to me? Because I watch these hearings and I want to pull my beard out because it's like, it's the same old stuff. It's the same old people that have been blabbering for 20 years and they've never been right about a single fucking thing. And I'm just like, come on, let's get some new people out here. Let's get you up there and tell them some stuff. So, okay. So is there anybody that you have encountered in the UFO community? We could do a game where we'd be trust, don't trust.
Okay,
you want to play that
Let's
game?
play that game.
All right. Okay. Stephen Greer.
Don't trust.
Linda Moulton Howe.
Trust.
Richard Dolan.
Trust.
Okay. Well, some of these people you don't know.
Okay, I'll go with I don't know them.
Okay, Coulthard. This Coulthard guy. Ross Coulthard.
Don't
know him. Luis Elizondo.
I trust.
Okay. And by the way, Luis, if you have no neck, you don't wear a high collar. You wear a low collar, just so you know that. Okay. So David Grush, this guy who's been testifying, who's an inside Pentagon. Do you know who that guy is?
Don't know.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Jaime Maussan.
Don't know.
Don't know him. You don't know Jaime? He's Mexican. He speaks your language. You don't know him?
Oh, well, maybe you might be pronouncing it like.
Okay. Well, all right. Jacques Vallée.
50-50.
50-50. Why do you hesitate on Vallée? He's very.
Because I have not yet researched like enough, so I cannot say. I cannot tell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whitley Strieber.
Don't trust.
Okay. Laura Eisenhower.
Trust.
Yeah. Do you know Melinda Leslie?
No.
Okay. She's a Sedona-based person who's done a lot of stuff. Travis Walton. Do you know that case?
Yeah. Trust. Yes.
Okay. And you met my friend Tom Reed the other night on the podcast that he forgot to invite me to. You didn't forget.
No,
I know
it was not his fault. I just changed the time though because it was very late in Spain.
Yeah, but he could have let me know the time changed. Anyway, my internet went out anyway, so I would have been there for like 15 minutes.
Yes.
Tom, do you trust that Tom Reed's case is for real?
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
And it's interesting because I interviewed him for Ancient Aliens. I've interviewed him for Uncovering Aliens and Ancient Aliens, and at least twice. And we went right down to the park. And by the way, I'm going there to UFO Monument Park next weekend. I'm going to be up there speaking at a special event, so show up for that if you're in the Great Barrington area. And it was funny because as we got down across this bridge where the lights came up, and it was very scary stuff, and got down closer to where the abduction actually took place, where the car died, you could just feel it. He was just getting tenser and tenser and more wound up and more wound up. And I was really working him to get some good emotional responses out of him. And it really, to this day, still freaks him out. And it's a shame that there's no acknowledgement of this this is why the hearings piss me off a little bit, because there are a lot of people out there like Tom who've had these experiences who can't really tell anybody about it. Or if they do, they get made fun of. In other words, there's no
Yes.
safe place for them to go with their stories and get help and get support.
Well, that's part of the system of control of the narrative.
Mhm.
The ones that are actually telling the most amount of truth and knowledge are the ones that tend to be the ones that are silenced, that do not have so much opportunities or get, cut out. Because I know a lot of people who are very legit, but they always bring up like a lot of conflict,
Mhm.
with how, if they're going to present the information, writing the book, they get targeted by the deep state government. So, I see that. And then I see a lot of the UFO people that, I obviously know that they're not telling the truth, or that they are utilizing, they're under mind control, or, with fake screen memories.
Yeah.
That because they follow a narrative, they just get there, so it depends on the people behind,
Is there anybody that you would like to talk about that I haven't mentioned that you like or don't like, that you think is worth people knowing? You don't have to. You don't absolutely.
I do. I will do.
Okay.
Elena Danaan.
Elena Danaan. Okay. And because she's...
The statement about how her connections have taken away all the gray beans from this planet and the solar system was just ridiculous.
Okay. All right. All right. And then you and I have something in common, which I think makes us friends, is that I catch a lot of shit because I tell people the truth. And I tell people that I'm sorry, I don't care if this guy or that guy's selling little pins of the Calvine UFO. It's just the tip of a mountain peak peeking through the fog, right? And you piss people off too, because you say truth and you challenge a lot of the accepted UFO hierarchies opinions, right? And there is a hierarchy in the UFO community. There's no question. Not everybody's welcome. Right? Not every opinion is welcome. So do you have anything you'd like to say about the things people say about you? Because people say shit about me that's untrue all the time. So, and I usually correct it, but I don't always. Is there anything you'd like to say about that? And again, it's your option. So.
In 2020, when I was supporting the gray alien agenda, I was very welcomed by anybody. Everybody was like, oh, she looks just like a hybrid. She's so pretty. Like, oh, she's like intelligent. Let's, promote her and give her space to talk. The moment that I disengaged with the grays and that I started to reveal the truth, the bold truth, is the moment in which people started turning against me.
Right.
And making up stuff like, oh, she's a satanic, she comes from a satanic background and she's not of the light. What the fuck is that?
Yeah. Don't you live with your mom still or something? Yeah. I mean, it's like, I bet mom and Marina are real satanic. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So so that's BS then.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, well, it's been great to have you again to talk in a different format. I'd like to do this more often with people that I really like and respect. And you just happened to be in town, so we got here and had this good conversation. Is there any final things you'd like to say? Where did people find you? You're on all social media, and then marinaseren.com, I believe, is the website. Correct?
Yes, correct. Well, I would like to say to remind people that it is very important right now that we claim back our sovereignty and that we do not trust people outside of us. Only trust yourself, because everybody here has an agenda. So please develop discernment. That's very important. And I would like to say that people can find my information in www.marinaseren.com.
Okay.
For spiritual coaching services and also one-to-one conversations. So if there's anybody that do not need or want any kind of advice, but they just want to talk about their experiences, I'm open. I'm all ears. And I can share information about my own life too on a private one-to-one conversation. So they can message me there and we can arrange and schedule an appointment. Okay.
Well, that sounds really, really good. It's funny. I think it was Alex Collier who we just talked about, who said, don't accept any help you didn't ask for when it comes to ETs and aliens. And the other thing is, we're moving into a time, I think, when this is going to become more of a reality, and we have to decide what we think about it. And what's really frightening to me, not frightening, but disturbing to me, is we don't have the right people talking about it. So it's really great to have you here, and because I think you're one of the right people to talk about it, even if I don't agree with you on everything, and I agree with you on a lot, but even if I don't, even if we have some disputes, one of us is right. And those other people over there are probably not right. So you're come here and you're going to get the answer. So thank you for being here. I appreciate your time. And have a great rest of your vacation. Your first trip to the United States, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Have a great rest of your vacation. Maybe go sing somewhere or something. Do some.
I will do that.
You do that. Okay.
Definitely.
All right, Marina, Seren, thank you very much for being here. Guys, I will be back on Monday with the Real News Live show with Jen. And